I want to start by sharing something very real with you, something I have felt deeply myself. I used to know all the grammar rules. I studied hard, but still, I couldn't speak English well. I felt stuck, frustrated, like my words were trapped inside, but I didn't know how to set them free. Maybe you feel the same. Maybe you've tried many times, but it feels hard to move forward. Maybe you feel tired or worried or even scared to make mistakes. I want you to know, you are not alone. There's a reason most people never change. It's not because they are lazy. It's because they carry invisible weight inside, fear, doubt, and old stories that tell them you can't. But life is short, and the time to change is now. This story I'm going to share with you is about a book, a simple book that changed my life forever. It helped me find courage, hope, and a new way to learn English. If you've ever felt lost or afraid, this story is for you. So, let's begin this journey together. Let's read, learn, and grow, one word at a time. Chapter 1. Lost and Searching. There was a time in my life when everything felt heavy. I woke up every day with no real reason. I went to work, came back home, and slept. Every day was the same. Nothing felt special. Nothing felt alive. I wasn't sad, but I wasn't happy either. It was something in between, like walking through life with no color. People around me smiled. They laughed, talked, and moved forward. But I felt stuck, like my feet were on the ground, but my heart wasn't moving. English was part of this struggle too. I had been trying to learn it for years. I watched videos. I read a few short stories. I even joined a class once. But no matter what I did, I still couldn't speak it well. I knew some grammar rules. I knew some vocabulary. But when someone talked to me, my mind froze. I stayed silent. I felt small. I thought maybe English just wasn't for me. But deep inside, I knew something else. I wanted more. Not just more English, more life. I wanted to understand the world. I wanted to talk to people from different places. I wanted to learn new ideas, to grow, to feel something again. But I didn't know how. I didn't know where to begin. One day, I was walking through the city. It was a slow afternoon, with gray clouds in the sky. My feet took me to a part of town I didn't visit often. It was quiet there, no noise, no crowd, just small roads, old buildings, and silence. As I walked, I saw a little bookstall on the corner. It was made of wood, and the books were stacked in messy piles. Some books were new, some were old and dusty. Most people walked past it without looking. But something about it pulled me in. I walked closer. The man at the stall gave me a small smile and nodded. He didn't say anything. I looked at the books, picking one up, then another. Nothing felt interesting. Just textbooks, novels, and old newspapers. I was about to leave when my eyes stopped on something strange. It was a thin brown book, no picture, no title, just a plain cover with gold edges that had faded over time. I picked it up. The cover felt soft and warm in my hands, like it had been held by many people. There was no name on the front, no author, no big words. Just one small sentence written inside the first page. This is not a story. This is a mirror. I paused. What did that mean? A mirror? I looked around. No one was watching. So I opened the book and started reading. The first line said, "If you feel lost, it is not because the road is gone. It is because your eyes are closed." I read it again. Slowly. Then again. Something moved inside me. A small feeling, a voice, a kind of light, quiet and soft. I turned the page. You were not born to follow others. You were born to find your own truth. I didn't know why, but my hands began to shake. My heart beat a little faster. These were simple sentences, easy English, but they felt big. They felt true. It was like someone had written these words just for me. I looked at the man at the bookstall. He was still sitting there, not looking at me. "How much is this book?" I asked. He smiled. "It's not for sale," he said, "but you can take it." "Are you sure?" "Yes," he said. "Maybe it's your time." I didn't understand what he meant, but I nodded. I held the book like it was something important, something alive. As I walked home, I kept reading. The more I read, the more I felt something changing. The words were simple, no big grammar, no hard vocabulary, but they were full of meaning. The book didn't teach English in the way my teachers had. It didn't give me exercises or rules, but every line helped me think, feel, and understand. And I was reading in English, not with fear, but with feeling. That night, I sat on my bed with the book in my hands. I read until my eyes got tired. The words stayed in my head. Some made me cry. Some made me smile. Some made me ask questions I had never asked myself before. One sentence said, "You cannot change your life if you do not first change your story." I closed the book and looked around my small room. It wasn't special. The walls were bare, the light was weak. But for the first time in a long time, something felt different. Something felt possible. I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't have a plan. But I knew this. I was not going to let this feeling go. I was going to keep reading, keep learning, keep searching. Maybe this book had no name, but it had found me. And maybe, just maybe, this was the day everything started to change. The next morning, I woke up early. I made tea and opened the book again. I read a few more pages. Each one felt like it was talking to me. One page said, "You are not late. You are just early in your journey." That line stayed with me all day. I wrote it on a paper and kept it in my pocket. When I felt tired or unsure, I read it again. In the days that followed, I carried the book everywhere, to work, to the bus, to the park. I read a little during breaks, sometimes just one sentence. But that was enough. The book didn't shout. It whispered. But the whisper was strong, and slowly I began to change. I started writing in a notebook, just small thoughts, a few lines each day. I wrote in English. It wasn't perfect. My spelling was not always right. My grammar had mistaken, but I didn't care. I was learning. I was feeling. I was alive. That week, I did something else I hadn't done in years. I went to the public library. It was quiet inside, filled with books and soft light. I found the English section. For the first time, I didn't feel scared. I picked up a simple storybook and started reading. It wasn't easy, but it wasn't painful either. I used a pencil to underline words I didn't know. I wrote meanings in the side. I read out loud, very softly, so I could hear my voice in English. And I remembered something the book had said. Your voice matters, even if it shakes. Yes, my voice shook. Yes, my words were broken, but they were mine, and they were real. Every day I read a little more. Every day I felt a little lighter. The book didn't give me all the answers, but it gave me something more important, the right questions. Why do I want to learn English? What is the life I really want? What is stopping me? I didn't have all the answers yet, but I was starting to see the path. A path that began with one book, one page, one moment of truth. That's how it began. Not with a big event. Not with a big teacher. Just with a small book and a tired heart that was finally ready to listen. I don't remember the last day I felt truly alive before that. But I remember the first day I started feeling alive again. It was the day I found the book that changed my life forever. Chapter 2. A book with no name. I sat by the window that evening, holding the thin book in my hands. There was no cover image, no famous name, no short summary at the back. It looked like it had been forgotten by the world. But to me, it felt like a secret, a quiet treasure only I had found. The pages were yellow and soft, like they had lived a long life. The corners were bent. A few words were underlined in pencil by someone before me. Maybe they had felt the same connection I was starting to feel. Maybe they had also stopped in their tracks, surprised that such simple words could go so deep. I turned to the first page again. I read the same sentence slowly. This is not a story. This is a mirror. That one line stayed in my head. It followed me as I made tea. It echoed in my thoughts as I ate dinner. And later that night, when everything was quiet and the lights were off, I lay in bed and whispered the sentence to myself again. This is not a story. This is a mirror. What did that mean? Maybe it meant that this book would show me who I really was. Maybe the stories inside would not be about someone else, but about me, my hopes, my fears, my life. The next morning, before checking my phone, before even brushing my teeth, I opened the book again. The words that touch your heart, it said, are the ones you already carry inside you. I paused. I read that line 3 times. My eyes filled with quiet tears. Not the loud kind, just a soft warmth, like my soul had been waiting for this message. This wasn't a normal book. It didn't have chapters. It didn't tell a long story. It was made of short thoughts, quiet reflections, and small truths. Some lines were just 5 words. Some pages had only 1 sentence, but every word felt important. I read slowly, not because the English was hard. It wasn't. But because I didn't want to rush. These words were like little lights, and I wanted to feel each one. One page said, "You don't need to shout to be heard. You just need to speak with honesty." Another page said, "The people who left didn't break you. They showed you where your strength begins." As I read, it felt like someone understood me, not in the way a teacher understands a student, but in the way a friend understands your silence. The words didn't try to fix me. They didn't tell me I was broken. They simply reminded me that I was still here, still breathing, still growing, still capable of change. That feeling, of being seen without being judged, is rare. It's the kind of feeling we search for in people but often find in books. The language was clear and soft, simple grammar, no long or difficult words. But that didn't make it small. It made it powerful. Every sentence stayed in my heart longer than in my mind. And the more I read, the more I saw myself inside those pages. There was a part that said, "Your story is not finished. Stop acting like it is." I sat with that line for a while. My story is not finished. Even though I was older than some learners, even though I had failed many times, even though I felt tired, my story was not finished. That was the truth I had forgotten. That was the lie I had believed for too long. The lie that it was too late. But this book, this nameless, authorless book, was waking something up inside me. It was asking me not to give up, not on English, not on myself, not on the life I still wanted to live. One page had a very short sentence. It said, "Begin again." That was it. Just 2 words. But I wrote them down on a small piece of paper and placed it near my desk. Every time I felt tired, I looked at it. Begin again. It gave me permission to try, even if I wasn't perfect. Even if I didn't know everything, I could start again. That day, I made a decision. I was going to read at least 1 page from the book every morning and every night, like medicine, like prayer, like a quiet reminder that I was still here, still learning, still becoming. Soon, I began to notice something else. My English reading became easier, not because I had memorized more words, but because I had relaxed. I wasn't afraid of the page anymore. I was not trying to be perfect. I was just trying to feel and understand. That made all the difference. Some days, I read 1 sentence. Other days, I read 10 pages. Sometimes I read the same page over and over again, not because I didn't understand it, but because I wanted to keep feeling it. That's how I knew the connection was real. And slowly, I began to trust myself again. I trusted my voice, even if it was quiet. I trusted my heart, even if it was still healing. I trusted the journey, even if I didn't know where it would take me. The book never told me what to do. It never gave me steps, but it gave me something better: clarity. It helped me ask, what matters to me? It helped me wonder, what kind of life do I want? It helped me believe, maybe I'm not broken. Maybe I'm just beginning. One afternoon, while sitting in the park, I opened a page that said, "Some books teach you something. A few books heal you." I smiled, because that was exactly how I felt. This book was not just helping me learn English. It was helping me heal, helping me feel human again, helping me remember that I had something to offer, not just to the world, but to myself. I still didn't know who wrote the book. There was no name on the back, no website, no publisher, just words, honest, simple, beautiful words. At first, that made me curious. I wanted to find the author. I wanted to say, thank you. But the more I read, the more I realized it didn't matter. The person who wrote this book didn't want to be famous. They just wanted the words to help someone, and they had helped me. That evening, as the sun went down and the sky turned orange, I looked at the last sentence I had read. It said, "Sometimes the book is not the teacher. You are. The book just reminds you what you already knew." I closed the book and sat still. Yes, that's what it felt like someone reminding me of truths I had forgotten, of dreams I had left behind, of hope I had buried under years of noise and fear. I looked at the sky and whispered, "Thank you." Not to anyone, just to the moment, to the feeling, to the journey that had quietly begun when I picked up that nameless book. The world around me was the same. The street, the people, the sounds. But inside me, something had shifted. I was no longer the same. I had found a book with no name. But it had found me first, and it had already started to change everything. Chapter 3. Words that felt like fire. The days passed slowly, but something inside me was moving fast. Every morning, I reached for the book before anything else. I didn't check my phone. I didn't rush to get dressed. I just opened the book and read. Sometimes one page, sometimes just one line. But each word felt like it had weight, like it was written with fire. I had read books before, school books, English textbooks, stories for tests, but none of them made me feel like this. This book didn't ask me to study, it asked me to feel. And the more I felt, the more I started to see myself, clearly, deeply, sometimes painfully. One line said, "You cannot heal what you refuse to see." That hit me hard. For years I had been running away from my past, from the times I failed, from the times I gave up, from the people I lost. I pretended I was okay. I told myself I didn't care. But the truth is, I did care. I cared so much that I tried to bury it all. But pain doesn't go away when you bury it. It grows in the dark, quietly, slowly. That book didn't let me hide anymore. It showed me my fear, but in a gentle way. It didn't blame me. It didn't push me. It just held up a mirror and whispered, "Look." I remember reading this line one evening. "You are not weak because you feel. You are strong because you survive." I closed the book and sat quietly. That sentence felt like it knew me, like it had watched me struggle all these years. My chest felt heavy, and then light. My eyes filled with tears, and then peace. I had been afraid of my feelings. I thought emotions made me soft. But now I started to see feeling was not weakness, it was human. The book also helped me see the power of English in a new way. I used to think English was only for jobs, for tests, for travel. But now I saw it was something deeper. It was a voice, a door, a way to understand ideas from all over the world. It was not just a language, it was a life skill. Before, I was afraid of English. I thought it was too big for me, too difficult, too far away. But these simple, beautiful sentences were written in English, and they were changing me. They were waking me up. They were healing me. If I could feel this much from English words, then English was no longer my enemy. It was becoming my friend. One day I read a line that said, "Sometimes a book finds you when you're ready." That made me stop. I looked at the book in my hands. It was not a bestseller. It was not taught in schools. No one on the street knew about it. But it had found me, not when I was strong, but when I was open, when I was ready to hear its voice. I remembered all the times I had tried to learn English before. I memorized word lists. I repeated grammar drills. I wrote exams. But I was never ready in my heart. I was learning with pressure, not with love. But now, something had changed. I didn't want to pass a test. I wanted to understand life. I wanted to grow. And English was helping me do that, one sentence at a time. The more I read, the more my world began to change. At work, I started noticing things I had ignored before. The way people talked, the way they shared their feelings, their stories. I listened more. I spoke a little more too, even if my grammar wasn't perfect. And slowly, I began to feel less afraid of speaking up. At home, I started writing again, not for anyone else, just for myself. I wrote small letters to my younger self. I wrote about my memories, my dreams, my pain. I wrote in English, not perfectly, but honestly. One night, I wrote something in my notebook that surprised me. Maybe I don't need a new life. Maybe I just need to see my life with new eyes. That line stayed with me, and I realized that's what the book was doing. It wasn't giving me a different life. It was helping me see my own life differently. Before, I looked at my past with shame. Now I was starting to see strength. Before, I looked at my fear with judgment. Now I saw a lesson. Before, I looked at my failures as endings. Now I saw them as beginnings. The book had a line that said, "A flame is small, but it can light a whole room." That was how I felt. Each page, each sentence, they were small flames. And together, they were lighting something inside me. A fire, not a loud fire, not a fire that burns everything down, but a quiet fire that warms and heals. And that fire gave me courage. Courage to speak even when my words felt broken. Courage to try again even after so many failures. Courage to believe that maybe, just maybe, I was more than I thought. Sometimes I read the same line over and over again. Not because I didn't understand the meaning, but because I was trying to feel the truth. One of my favorite lines was, "You don't need to be loud to be powerful. You just need to be real." That line changed the way I saw myself. I was always a quiet person. I didn't talk much in groups. I stayed silent in meetings. I thought maybe something was wrong with me. But now, I began to see quiet people can be strong too. I didn't have to shout to matter. I just had to be honest. English became the tool I used to be honest. Not just with others, but with myself. One morning, I stood in front of the mirror and said out loud in English, "I am learning. I am healing. I am growing." It was a simple sentence, but it felt big. It felt real. The words didn't come from a textbook. They came from my journey, from my heart, from the fire that was now burning inside me. I remember walking through the city one afternoon and looking at the people around me. Everyone was in a rush, going somewhere, doing something. I wondered how many of them also felt lost, how many of them were carrying invisible pain, how many were just waiting for something, a sign, a word, a book, to wake them up. And I thought to myself, maybe if this book could change me, it could help others too. I didn't have all the answers. I still made mistakes. I still felt small some days, but I was no longer the same person. I had read words that felt like fire, and they had burned away my fear. Not all of it, but enough to take one more step, and then another. I closed the book that night with a calm heart. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but I knew this. I was ready to keep going, to keep reading, to keep becoming the person I was meant to be. Because once you read something that lights a fire inside you, you can never go back to darkness again. Chapter 4. Why You Must Begin Again. The book had a line that stopped me completely. It said, "You can start over." At first, I didn't believe it. Start over? At this age? After so many failures? After all the time I've lost? I closed the book and stared at the wall. Those words stayed with me like a quiet echo. You can start over. It sounded simple, but it was not easy. Because to start over, you must first accept something difficult. That the path you were walking is no longer the right one. That takes honesty. That takes courage. I thought about all the times I had tried and failed. English classes I dropped. Jobs I didn't get. Books I never finished. Goals I left behind. There were many. And they didn't feel like history. They felt like shame. They followed me everywhere. I kept asking myself, why even try again? But the book didn't ask for a big answer. It didn't tell me to plan 5 years ahead or become a new person in one day. It just whispered, start small, but start now. so that's what I did. That evening, I took out a notebook, a simple, clean one with no writing inside. On the first page, I wrote, "Today I begin again." That was all. Just one sentence. My handwriting was shaky, but my heart felt light. I didn't know what I would write next. But that one line felt like a promise. The next morning, I added a second line. "I am learning English, one step at a time." And that's when I decided to try something I had avoided for a long time. I opened my computer and searched for an English class. Not a big one, just a small group, a friendly teacher, a safe place to speak, even if I made mistakes. I found a community class near my area. It was only 2 days a week. I hesitated before clicking register. My hand hovered over the button. My mind said, "What if you quit again?" But the book's voice was louder in my heart. "You can start over." Click. I registered. And just like that, a new chapter in my life quietly began. The first day of class, I was nervous. My heart was beating fast. I was the oldest student there. Most of the others were younger, students, workers, immigrants. They spoke faster than me. They seemed more confident. I felt small, but the teacher welcomed everyone with a smile. She said, "In this class, we make mistakes, and we learn from them. Mistakes are welcome here." I smiled, because that sounded like the book I had been reading. We did small exercises, introductions, simple questions, reading short texts. My English was slow, but it came, not perfectly, but honestly. After class, I walked home with a strange feeling. It wasn't excitement. It wasn't fear. It was something deeper. Peace. I had done it. I had taken a step. A small one, yes, but real. That night, I opened my journal and wrote, "Today, I spoke in English without fear." It wasn't perfect, but I tried, and I'm proud of that. Every day, I wrote something. Sometimes one sentence, sometimes a full page. I wrote about what I learned in class, about how I felt when someone understood me, about how I felt when they didn't. I wrote about the lines from the book that stayed in my heart. One day, I read this line again. "Your life doesn't need to be loud to be meaningful." That helped me, because I was not doing anything big. I was not making money or becoming famous. I was just learning, quietly, slowly, but deeply. And that was enough. I started building new habits. I set small goals, like learn 5 new words today, or speak 1 sentence in English to someone, or watch a video without subtitles. And each time I completed a goal, I wrote it in my journal. These little wins became my new story. They helped me see that I was no longer standing still. I was moving, step by step. But not every day was easy. There were days I didn't want to go to class. Days I felt tired. Days I read a line in English and didn't understand it. And in those moments, the old voice in my head came back. "Why are you doing this? You'll quit again." But then, I remembered something the book said. Progress is not a straight line. Some days you walk, some days you rest, but never turn back. So, I didn't turn back. Instead, I read slower. I asked more questions. I allowed myself to be a beginner again. And that changed everything. Being a beginner is hard. It means accepting that you don't know, that you need help, that you will fall. But it also means you have space to grow, to explore, to become. The fear of beginning never fully goes away. But I started to learn how to walk with it. One class, the teacher asked us to stand up and speak for 1 minute about anything we loved. My hands shook. My mouth went dry. But I stood up, and I spoke. I talked about the book, the nameless book that had changed my life. I told the class how I found it, how it made me feel seen, how it made me begin again. When I sat down, one student leaned over and said, "That was beautiful." I smiled. Not because my English was perfect, it wasn't, but because my message was real. And that's what I was learning, in English and in life. Real matters more than perfect. I continued to write in my journal. I added small things I was grateful for. I understood a new word today. I spoke to someone without fear. I read a full page and understood it. These small things added up, like drops of water filling a cup, slowly, steadily. And then, one day, I wrote this line. I think I'm becoming the person I once gave up on. I paused after writing that. I looked at the sentence again, and I smiled. Yes, that's what it felt like. I was returning to myself, the version of me that once dreamed of learning English, of reading books, of having deep conversations, of helping others. He was still there, just waiting. I closed the book that night with a quiet thank you, not just to the author, whoever they were, but to myself, for having the courage to begin again. The next morning, I found this line waiting for me. A new life doesn't come with noise. It begins in silence, with one brave yes. That was my yes. That was my beginning. Chapter 5. Failures are not final. At first, I was excited. I felt like something new had started in my life. I had finally taken a step forward. I had joined an English class. I started writing a journal. I even felt proud. But the truth is, change is never easy. And I learned that the hard way. In the classroom, I sat near the back. The teacher spoke clearly, but sometimes the words were too fast. I couldn't follow everything. When it was my turn to speak, I froze. My mouth was dry. My heart was racing. I tried to say a simple sentence, but I said the wrong word. I heard soft laughter. Maybe it wasn't cruel, but I still felt embarrassed. I wanted to hide. After class, I walked home slowly. I looked down at my shoes the whole way. I felt stupid. I thought, maybe I'm not good at this. Maybe I'll never learn English. Maybe this dream isn't for me. When I reached home, I opened my journal. I had only written 3 pages. I had already missed writing for 2 days. The excitement from before was gone. I took out the old book again, the one I found at that street bookstall. I held it in my hands like a quiet friend. I flipped through the pages until something caught my eye. The page said, "Falling is not failure. Staying down is, if you fall, you are trying. If you stand again, you are growing." I read it again and again. Simple words, but they spoke to my heart. I remembered learning how to ride a bicycle as a child. I fell so many times. I scraped my knees. I cried. But I didn't give up. I didn't stop. And one day, I could ride freely. Why was I forgetting that now? That same page continued. Language is not only about grammar. It is courage. It is patience. It is the voice you build, word by word, mistake by mistake. I closed the book and sat quietly. I realized something. I was not failing. I was learning. And every mistake I made was a step forward, even if it didn't feel like it. So, I opened my journal and wrote, "Today I made mistakes, but I also tried. And that's enough for now." After that, I stopped hiding from my mistakes. When I didn't understand something in class, I raised my hand. I asked questions. At first, It felt scary, but then I noticed something. Asking questions helped me learn faster. Slowly, my confidence grew. There was one line in the book that I underlined many times. You don't become wise by winning. You become wise by falling and standing taller each time. That line became a part of me. I repeated it quietly while walking to class. I whispered it when I felt low. And each time I made a mistake, I reminded myself that falling was okay. What mattered most was getting back up. I still struggle sometimes. I still forget words. But I no longer feel ashamed. I see every mistake as part of the journey. The book didn't just teach me English. It taught me how to be kind to myself. I'm not perfect, and that's fine. Because now I know failure is not the end. It's just one chapter in a longer, beautiful story. Chapter 6. A sentence that changed me. It was a quiet evening. I was sitting alone in my small room, the same room where I had once felt stuck and tired. The book was open in front of me, just like so many evenings before. I didn't read fast. I didn't always understand every word. But that night, something different happened. There it was. A short sentence, sitting in the middle of the page. It wasn't big or bold. It didn't look important at first. But when I read it, something inside me stopped. I am not my past. I am what I do next. I read it again. Then again. I didn't need a dictionary this time. I understood every word. But more than that, I felt the meaning. This sentence was not just about grammar or vocabulary. It was about life. It was about me. For so long, I had carried my past like a heavy bag. My mistakes, my failures, my fears. I believed they were part of who I was. I believed they defined me. But this sentence told me something different. Something powerful. It told me that I could let go of that bag. I could choose a new direction. I didn't have to be the person I was yesterday. I could become the person I chose to be today. That one sentence became my guide. I wrote it on a small piece of paper and stuck it on the wall next to my bed. I wrote it again in my journal. The next morning, I looked in the mirror and said it out loud. I felt silly at first, but I kept saying it. I am not my past. I am what I do next. When I felt weak, I said it. When I was tired in class, I said it. When I forgot a word or made a mistake, I said it quietly to myself. That sentence gave me strength. It reminded me that I was not finished. My story was still being written, and I was the one holding the pen. Some people think you need big words to sound smart. But this sentence was simple, easy English, just 10 small words. And still it changed something deep inside me. It made me believe that I could grow, that I could change, that my future didn't have to look like my past. And slowly, day by day, that belief became real. I studied with more focus. I listened more carefully. I stopped being so hard on myself. And each time I repeated that sentence, I felt a little stronger. It was like building a muscle. Repetition made it grow. Repetition made it true. There are many things I don't remember from the book, but I will never forget that one line. It wasn't just a sentence. It was a new beginning. And maybe, just maybe, one simple sentence can change a life. Chapter 7. The English in My Soul. English was never just a school subject for me anymore. It had become something much bigger. It was like a voice inside me, a quiet, steady voice that helped me understand the world around me, and most importantly, helped me understand myself. This voice did not speak perfectly. Sometimes it stumbled. Sometimes it was slow, but it was real, and it was mine. Before, I thought learning English was about memorizing rules or passing tests. I thought it was about getting every word right. But now, I saw it differently. English was a bridge to new ideas, new people, new possibilities, and that bridge was growing stronger every day. I began to read more. At first, I read simple stories, books with easy words and clear sentences. I would sit quietly with a book, feeling the words as they came, letting the story move me. Sometimes I read the same page many times, not because I didn't understand, but because I wanted to feel it again. The stories helped me see new worlds and meet new people, even if only in my imagination. Reading was no longer a test. It was a joy. I also started writing more. Not long essays or difficult grammar exercises, but small notes, simple letters to myself, and short stories. I wrote about my day, my feelings, my hopes, and my fears. Writing helped me speak with my heart. Sometimes my sentences were not perfect, but they were honest. And that honesty was more important than perfection. Speaking English became a new challenge. I didn't try to be perfect anymore. Instead, I tried to be truthful. I spoke to friends, classmates, and even strangers when I could. At first, I was shy. I was afraid I would say something wrong. But I learned that people appreciated my effort more than my mistakes. Each conversation gave me confidence. It was like my voice was learning to walk for the first time. Slow, a little shaky, but full of life. English became my second heartbeat. It was always there, in the classroom, in my thoughts, in my dreams. It moved with me. It gave me a new rhythm in life. One day, I sat by the window, watching the city move fast outside. Cars passed by, people hurried on the sidewalks, and the sun was bright in the sky. But inside me, there was calm. I opened my notebook and wrote, "English is not just words. It is my voice. It is my way to say who I am." That sentence was true. English was no longer a subject to study. It was part of me. I remembered how scared I had been at the beginning, how I felt lost and small. But now, I felt something new. Hope. Hope that I could connect with people beyond my home, beyond my past. Hope that I could share my thoughts and dreams. Hope that I was not alone. The book I had found was still with me, but now I used many tools to learn. I watched videos, listened to podcasts, talked to others, and read books. Each experience added a new layer to my understanding. Each small success gave me energy to keep going. Learning English was not always easy. There were hard days when words escaped me, days when I felt tired and wanted to give up. But those days became fewer and fewer, because I learned to listen to the quiet voice inside, the voice that said, "Keep going. You are doing well." English helped me see the world through new eyes. I could watch movies and understand the stories. I could read news and learn about faraway places. I could listen to music and feel the emotions in the songs. English opened doors I never imagined. But more than that, English helped me see myself. It showed me that I was brave for trying, that I was growing every day, that I was more than my mistakes and fears, that I was a learner, a person who could change and become better. Sometimes when I spoke English, I felt proud. Not because I was perfect, but because I was real. Because I was showing the world who I was. English became a part of my soul. It was a light in my darkest days, a friend in my loneliness, a mirror to my true self. And I knew that this journey was only beginning. The words I spoke today were not the same as the words I spoke months ago. They were stronger, clearer, filled with meaning. And with each new word, I built a better future. I no longer feared English. I welcomed it. I no longer saw myself as a learner who was lost. I saw myself as a traveler on a journey full of stories, lessons, and hope. English was my bridge, my heartbeat, my voice, and I was ready to keep speaking, keep learning, and keep growing. Chapter 8. Helping Others Read. As I grew in my English learning and in my life, I began to notice something important. I wasn't the only one who felt lost and stuck. Around me, I saw many people just like I was before, scared, silent, unsure how to start. Some of them wanted to learn English but did not know how. Others felt afraid to speak because they thought their mistakes would make them look weak. I understood these feelings deeply because I had lived them. One day, I thought about the book that changed my life, the one with no name but full of wisdom. I wanted to share it, not because I wanted to be a teacher or a leader, but because I knew the power it held. I remembered how that book had spoken to my heart when I was ready. Maybe it could do the same for others. So, I started small. I gave the book to a friend who had told me she wanted to learn English but felt shy. I told her my story, how I felt lost, how the book helped me, how I began again despite my fears. She listened carefully. She took the book with a quiet smile. Then I waited. A few weeks later, she came back and told me she had read some pages. She said the book helped her believe she could try. She told me she had spoken a few words in English for the first time. Her smile was brighter. I felt warm inside. Something small had begun. That moment gave me courage. I wanted to do more. I started telling my story to others, classmates, neighbors, people I met at the market. I didn't preach or teach. I just shared my journey honestly. I told them how I struggled, how I made mistakes, how I kept going because of a simple sentence in a book. Some people were shy. Some didn't believe it was possible, but others listened. They asked questions. They wanted to try. I helped a few people find books and resources. I gave encouragement when they felt weak. I reminded them that every small step mattered. Helping others changed me too. When I gave the book or shared my story, I felt a new kind of joy. It was not the joy of success or praise. It was the joy of giving, the joy of seeing someone else's eyes light up with hope. I learned that when I help others grow, I grow too. When I share my journey, I heal a little more. I read to grow. I shared to heal. One day, a young woman told me, "Your story makes me feel less alone." Thank you for sharing. Those words were more valuable than any test score or certificate. I realized my journey was no longer just about me. It was about something bigger. It was about purpose, about using what I had learned to help others find their way. The book that once helped me become a reader was now a light for others, and that light was growing. I saw the power of simple kindness, of honest sharing, of believing that one person can make a difference. My English was still not perfect. My voice still shook sometimes. But now, I spoke not just for myself, but for others who wanted to be heard. And in that, I found new strength. Helping others read became part of my life, a new chapter in my story, And every time I saw someone smile because they understood a new word or spoke a new sentence, I knew. This was why I began. Because learning is never only about us. It is about connection, about community, about hope. Chapter 9. I met the author, or did I? There was a day I will never forget. I wanted to learn more about the book that had changed my life so deeply. I hoped to meet the author, the person who wrote those simple, powerful words that had spoken to my heart. I wanted to say thank you. I wanted to understand the story behind the story. I searched everywhere. I looked online. I asked people in the library. I tried to find the name of the author, the story of how the book was made. But no one knew. The book had no clear author. It was like a secret, a mystery. At first I felt confused. I thought, how can this be? How can a book so full of meaning come from no one? How can I thank a person I cannot find? But then slowly, I began to understand something important. The book was not just paper and ink. It was not only the words printed on the pages. The book was alive, in me. The lessons, the hope, the courage, they were no longer outside of me. They had become part of my heart. They were inside my thoughts. They were in my actions. Maybe the author didn't matter. Maybe the book was a gift meant to be shared, to grow inside every reader. Maybe the story was not finished until it touched a life, my life. I realized that I had changed. The book had changed me. And because of that, I was no longer just a reader. I was becoming a writer, a storyteller. I was writing my own story now. The fear, the failures, the small victories, they were chapters in my life. And I was the author of what came next. I sat quietly with this thought. I smiled to myself. The book's mystery did not make it less real. It made it more alive. I thought about the lessons I had learned, the courage I had found, the hope I carried. They were not borrowed from someone else. They were mine now. And so I began to write, not just in my journal, not just small notes. I began to write the story of my life, the story of learning English, growing, falling, and standing again. I wrote about the days I wanted to quit, but kept going. I wrote about the people I helped and who helped me. I wrote about the dreams I was still chasing. The book had taught me one last lesson. Life is a story we create every day. We are both readers and writers. I may never meet the author, but I don't need to. Because now I am the author of my own story, and I am ready to write the next chapter. Chapter 10. You are the next page. As I reach the end of my story, I want to speak directly to you, the person listening now. Maybe you are where I once was, feeling lost, tired, or unsure. Maybe English feels hard, or life feels heavy. Maybe you are holding a book, or maybe you don't know where to begin. Wherever you are, I want you to know one thing. You are not alone. This journey is not just mine. It is the journey of many. Every person who learns something new, who grows, who tries again, they walk this path. And every story has a turning point, a moment when things begin to change. My turning point came with a simple book and a single sentence. But your turning point might look different. It might be a word, a song, a kind smile, or a moment of courage. The truth is, English is not just about grammar or rules. It is a path that leads to new worlds, new friendships, and new ideas. It is a way to speak not only with others, but also with yourself. Maybe this video, This story you just heard is your book. Maybe it is the beginning of your turning point. And if it is, I want to say thank you for listening. Thank you for taking this step. You don't need to be perfect. You don't need to have all the answers. You just need to begin. Read a little, speak a little, fall, and then stand again. Every step you take matters. Every small effort builds your story, and every story is beautiful. Remember, you are not your mistakes. You are your courage to try. You are your choice to keep going. The book that changed my life was just the beginning. My story is still growing, and so is yours. So, what will you write on your next page? The journey is yours to make, and I will be here, cheering you on. Thank you for being part of this story. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today on Read and Learn English. I hope this story touched your heart, not just for learning English, but for life too. Remember, learning a language is more than just words and grammar. It's about courage, patience, and believing in yourself, even when it feels hard. If this story helped you, if it gave you hope or inspired you to keep trying, you can always come back and listen again. Every time you do, you'll grow a little more. And don't forget, your story matters. You are not alone on this journey. Keep reading, keep learning, and keep believing. I'm proud of you for being here today. Until next time, keep shining and keep speaking. See you soon.